All new tonight, H&N investigates a push to expose an elected official accused of taking tens of thousands of dollars in bribes.
A petition calls for legislative hearings. Our chief investigative reporter Lynn Kawano has the exclusive details.
Two former lawmakers were snagged in the federal scandal, but there's one more unidentified legislator still out there.
It's been 2.5 years since former Senator Jay Kalani English and Representative Ty Cullen were convicted of taking bribes from wastewater company owner Milton Choi. They've already served their time in federal prison and were released in 2024. But suspicion is spreading again at the Capitol after it was revealed earlier this year that another lawmaker, described by federal prosecutors as an influential state legislator, has never been charged.
Evidence that we have a member of the legislature serving that accepted a $35,000 bribe or a former legislator, until that can be cleared up, there's a cloud over that body.
The details of the mystery elected official were brought to light after our media partners, Honolulu Civil Beat, and attorneys with the Public First Law Center sued to get redacted information unsealed. The details revealed in January 2022, Representative Ty Cullen, who made a deal with the FBI, met with another suspect and the influential state legislator. The FBI recorded the conversation where that elected official took a $35,000 bribe. No charges against that person have ever been filed, but there is still time.
The statute of limitations for accepting a bribe as a state official is typically 5 years, so a 3-year delay is well within the window.
But a petition on change.org says the stakes are too high to wait. It calls for lawmakers to immediately convene an investigative committee with subpoena and contempt powers, hold hearings that are open to the public, and find out what happened to determine whether any state laws or ethical rules were violated, especially if this unknown lawmaker is still in office. The petition was started by retired federal public defender Alexander Silvert, who broke open other public corruption scandals.
In 2027, the statute of limitations will run, and if nothing gets done, this incident will be lost. We'll never know what really happened. And for the sake of transparency and good government and the public's right to know, we need some entity to investigate, and that entity has to be the legislature.
This is what would give people, I think, more faith that elected officials are also policing their own.
The petition does not need a minimum number of signatures to be filed at the Capitol. Experts say it will be an uncomfortable challenge for lawmakers.
You can't go on business as usual when you know that the integrity of your institution is to at least that degree corrupt. It doesn't have to be $1 million, but we know $35,000 is a huge stain on the integrity of our institutions.
If nothing else, take the petition and refer it to a committee for public hearings on whether or not the special committee should be created.
Silvert plans to file the petition with the legislature before the start of the new year. I'm Lynn Kawano, Hawaii News Now.